So it's so great to have another in conversation with Holly Bridges. And I first came across Holly's work through a fantastic book, which I'm really frustrated because it should be on my shelf, but I've lent it out to somebody. So hopefully Holly will share the picture of it and the name of it so you guys can go out and get it. But hello, Holly. Tell us where you are and what time of the day it is.
Hello, it's about 3 p.m. I'm in Perth, Western Australia. So it's a beautiful sunny day in May, which it should be cold and rainy, but it's not, but it's lovely. And I don't have a copy of my book, I'm sorry. So you'll have to
We'll flag that up later. And this is the joy of these Zoom calls, because I've been trying to speak to Holly and maybe get her to speak at one of our conferences, but of course it's impossible. She lives in Perth. But I just sent an email and she said yes. So this is the joy of Zoom. We can connect with people that we wouldn't normally and ask them some questions that are really pertinent and hopefully give you some support. So Holly, can you tell us a bit about your work prior to the book, maybe, and what you were up to?
Prior to the book, I homeschooled my children for quite a long time, and I did a psych degree in youth work and things like that earlier. And then as my children got older, I started a business around neuroplasticity and kind of what I'm doing now, tinkering with different exercises that can help bring the nervous system down so people can function cognitively better and sort of stay in their body. And I'm just drawn to it. And so when I found the polyvagal theory, I couldn't put it down, and I haven't ever since, because it just brought everything I knew all together and made such lovely sense of everything. So the book just had to be written, which is what a lot of people say about writing a book, but it was very much like that for me. And then I went and worked in services for about 3 years.
I understand the polyvagal system. I suppose we need to kind of check into that first of all. For people that wouldn't know what that means, what in short is the polyvagal system?
It is a way of describing physiologically how your body goes into flight or fight, or how it goes into rest and digest, sort of gentle mode. And then also that you have you sort of have three safety options. This is the basic thing for the polyvagal theory. You can have your first level of response can be as a safety option, and all mammals have this. We can socially engage. And so you can smile at people, smooth things over, talk to them, stroke their hand, and engage that way. And that might be enough to deal with the threat that's coming towards you. And threat might be a big word at that point. If that doesn't work as an option, or it's just out of the question, we have a second one, which is flight or fight, and we will, your whole physiology changes at that point, and you get in a much more heightened state. And that's one we all kind of know and we understand. But what Stephen Porges, who's the creator of the polyvagal theory, has done is added another one, which we've sort of all forgotten happens to us. Excuse the ice cream truck in the background. Happens to us, which is we immobilize, like all mammals do when they get under too much duress, like a rabbit in a headlight or a deer. We collapse, we freeze, and it's an entirely involuntary process, and it's extremely necessary. But the theory is that with people on the autism spectrum, they kind of hang out down there somewhere. Their physiology is sort of probably somewhere between flight or fight and in the immobilized state, and that's all they know. And so they're very prone to overload. They're very prone to dropping out, and they're not really in charge of their body. It's more in charge of them. So what I do is I teach at a physiological and emotional level, but more physiological, teach the nervous system how to be in a more parasympathetic state, because it almost doesn't know what that is. And it's a very, very interesting thing to do, to teach someone who's never felt really nice in their body and really rested. I was looking at a study last night they've done a lovely study on sleeplessness in children with autism, and looking at how you might, determine how people get autism. But essentially everyone who's got a kid on the spectrum knows they don't sleep. And we're just starting to look at the physiology of this, but that kind of thing makes sense if your body's always stuck in flight or fight. It doesn't easily groove into that deep restful place, which is where we all regenerate and rejuvenate at a physiological and a a cognitive brain level.
Do you think, and again, this is a big question, and it's the question that we're always asked. So the autistic child, are they predisposed to this? So they come into the world with this system already a little bit different? Or does something happen in early infancy because their brain neurology is different that trips something? And you might not know the answer to this, but I'm always curious to know what comes first, you know, the autism or the anxiety, or the neurological difference or the physiological difference?
I honestly don't know how to tease it all apart. I think we always want to get very concrete with things and know the answer. And I think with this we don't. There are so many variables, there are so many factors, so that it both could be true in a sense. You know, if you have an intense experience with birth, maybe that triggers it, maybe it doesn't for some people. Like you know, I always have people sort of wanting to, you know, they often want the cause because then they can resolve it, but I don't think life's like that either. I think it's beyond us. So rather than look backwards, for me, I prefer to see what we can do with the person in front of us.
But I suppose what you have is, if you have a system that's highly tuned, finely tuned, and then thrown into some chaotic environment, and I don't mean, you know, trauma, I just mean a family, you know, with lots of energy, that system is going to suddenly go, whoa, what the hell's going on here? And it's going to create some protective behaviors. This is what we talk about, these protective behaviors, which will be unique to the child. And some of the protective behaviors will be, you know, hiding, because that's the best way to keep safe. And the others is kicking out. And if you look at the autistic behaviors, they kind of, those are the extremes, aren't they? And then you've got that bit in the middle, which you've just said, which is, I'll just say no. I'll just keep myself safe by immobilizing. But it's interesting because a lot of parents will think, well, if I can get rid of the autism, then this will stop. And what you're saying is, actually, if we manage this, whatever is their autism becomes much more manageable. Is that how you see it?
Yes, and I always go yes, yes, no, and
well, exactly. There's no answer. You know, if there is, we'd write the book and make millions, wouldn't we? You know, we just have to keep exploring.
Well, you would, but then I wouldn't want to do it either, because, you know, so much of the work for me is appreciating the person in front of you and their vibrancy, even if they're not looking particularly vibrant on that day or whatever, but their highly individual nature and brain. And if you start there rather than wanting to fix it, you provide an avenue of safety and then exploration and curiosity, where you can often get the person to be far more adept at dealing with a whole lot of environmental stimuli, because they can be more regulated. They can learn to self-regulate once they've got a bit more of a robust system.
Is there an age at which that's appropriate? I mean, how young can you get somebody to start understanding that I have this system internally that actually I can start to control?
I think you can do it at any age. I mean, you might have osteopaths working with very young children, and that can help to reinform the system. I work well with sort of 3, 4, 5-year-olds if the parents are really understanding of what I'm trying to do, because what you're trying to do there is you can't intellectually engage in that way, so you have to work through the parents, and you want them to bond really well, and you don't want to be the therapist in the white coat. So it kind of works if everyone can get on the same page there. So I don't think there's really any age, except that I get quite delighted and shocked at just how old the people can be and how much change you can have with when you start redirecting the nervous system. So I don't really think it's an age thing so much as everything has to be kind of just right. And that's the art, I think, of the work, is really tuning into the people that you're working with.
And you mentioned they're redirecting the nervous system. So what does that mean, something in concrete terms?
Well, yes, it's sort of nebulous. It's like everything that we're talking about. And it requires conditions as much as anything. So if you take the model, and it's why I like it, because it's quite simple, that we have three stages of safety with the Porges model, the Polyvagal Theory, and the body doesn't know this other one. It doesn't know an extremely gentle parasympathetic state. What you're trying to do is teach the body what that feels like. because you can't cognitively ask someone to go where they haven't been before. So at best, what we do often is just get the person down to what they know, and then they function at their optimum. But if you actually go a little bit underneath that and you start allowing the system to feel what it likes to be safe, you can keep working with that, and you expand that. It's almost like moving the system just enough out of its comfort zone so that it gets a little bit worried, then it goes, oh, is that all you want from me? And then it'll hold, and then you work some more, and you build it. And then at a neurophysical level, what you're talking about is the vagus nerve is not stuck in fifth gear.
It's like you're firing up something new, almost like it's like an unused muscle or something that you start to exercise.
Yeah, it's like you're reminding it, because the body goes, thanks, I've always wanted to do this, I just haven't been able to work out how. You're reminding it it's possible, and then it has to feel safe enough. And then there's all these other neurophysical systems with the immune system and all sorts of other interconnections that we have between brain and body that all have to change gears, because when you're in a really rest and digest stage, you have all sorts of functions happening that don't happen when you're in a highly sympathetic state. So the whole body has to actually, I say, jump train tracks. And it's so subtle, and it won't do it if the person can want to do everything for you and comply, but it won't happen unless they're actually feeling safe and they're actually engaged and they're actually choosing to do it, because it's a deeply personal, deeply individual process.
So that's pretty clear about what your therapy is doing, and it's a very real thing that the body could do instinctively. So how do you do it? There's no shortcut to this. Obviously, I can imagine it's years of therapy and intimacy and connection. But no? Oh, brilliant. So if someone listening was thinking, well, I haven't got access to Holly, what can I do today with my child to build this practice, this place that's safe?
Okay, so interestingly, like a couple of things. One, I've just last week finished, I do 8-day intensives, and 5 of them are consecutive. And by the end of that, very often I've got someone into that place, and then they know it. So then you're getting all these stories from the family and the support workers going, goodness, we're not walking on eggshells anymore, and they're starting to ask questions and articulate in a completely different way, and being more connected and loving and warm in a way that you can only be when your body feels good. So there's all this capacity to engage, and so that it can actually be quite quick. It's just quite an intense process, but it's phenomenal. And then I'll have people go, like a friend of mine, Piers, he's on one of my videos, who worked with me. We weren't friends then, but he just goes, oh my God, I'd never want it to be that fast. I would like to go really, really slow. I would hate that. But at the moment, and I'll send you a link, I've got my DVD on my website is, there's I can give you a free code, and so your listeners can download it. And so it goes through a workshop I did in Seattle, and then it shows some of the exercises. So it starts to let people have a little bit of a look at what this can be, and get a feel for it, and then see if it's something that they might want to do.
Can you give me an example of just one thing you might do? Because again, people might be thinking, is this way out of my league? Is this something that... Because we hear so many extreme things that people do to support autistic kids. And I'm just curious, how extreme are these exercises? Or is it very, very simple?
You can see behind me, I've got a gym ball.
Yes.
So one of the exercises I made up, more or less. It's just basic, like any useful things. All you do is either sit in a chair and put your feet on the ball and pedal, but the ball's very squishy, I say, like a pussycat on a fat belly, where it's kneading and soothing itself, instead of it being really taut, which is what we're used to doing with the balls and with everything. You're doing exercise and you're getting the body into shape, and we're not doing that. We're providing a condition where you can gently push on the ball for a bit, and then you stop and you close your eyes and you let the body kind of find a new place. And if you do that exercise and you're neurotypical, you often can you push for a bit, rest, do it 3 times. There's a bit of a process, but you can sit up and you feel like you've meditated for 45 minutes, but it takes you about 10-15 minutes to do. And I was in New York a while ago, and I had these ladies going, "Oh my God, it's better than Botox," because your whole face kind of gets clear and bright, and it allows oxygen and blood flow back up through the system. So it's gentle things like that where you're sorry, that was a puppy squeaking. I've got 6 puppies in the house at the moment, sorry, so they'll take everything. They're little exercises, micro movements, small things to help. If a body's been very stuck, it's very contracted, it doesn't need much to shift it a bit for these very delicate systems to perceive something new. And if you go too fast or too hard, or the person, so that's the mother dog barking. She's a little protective. You'll have to all bear with me. If you go too fast for the person, you miss it. So you're always trying to create these conditions where it's nice and safe, that they can learn to take the body into deeper and deeper states of shift. So if you would like, an example that I often give of this is a 20-year-old boy that I started working with, and huge anxiety. And so his for 4 years with his OT, the goals were just to walk down the street and say hi to the receptionist. He was just crippled with anxiety and would fall asleep all of the time. Like that, quite a mobilized thing, but quite involuntary. It might look like he's willfully not engaging, but he would just fall asleep. And so the first session he was just asleep, and then the second session I said, well, bring your big brother in who's also on the spectrum, and I can tell him about it, and then maybe you feel safer and you might listen and engage a little. So the brother came in and he thought it was really interesting, and then he tried this ball exercise, and he just sat on the couch and pedaled a bit and did this process just a little, but he went, wow, that's fantastic. I feel quite a lot better because it clears your head. So then this kid the next week was happy enough to engage a little. And all he did for the first week was put his feet on the ball, and he felt so destabilized by that, because your whole vestibular system, how you are in time and space, is kind of so set, and it doesn't want to let go. You're not trying to, it's just that's all you know, and you're safe there, so why would you give it up? So he did it, and all he did was push a few times on it and then stop, and I think close his eyes, and then felt quite dizzy. Not everyone feels dizzy, but he did, and that was it. But I had a message from his mum during the week going, it's incredible. He's taken a pizza out of the oven and he's cut it with a knife. And he was usually so scared of heat and knives that he wouldn't do anything like that. So he just progressed like this. So, probably 5 or 6 sessions later, the OT came back from holiday, and this kid easily walked down the street and he easily said hi to the receptionist because his body was in a better place.
And does it reset then, or does it pop? How can you get it to stay in that groove for longer so that it's an unconscious place that they start to be in? Because if you've done the work, and surely something could trigger it right back, and that's quite hard for people because they think, oh, I've got this new place, but of course they'll default back to their old place of feeling if they're not careful.
I don't know that they can go exactly back to where they were, because you've changed the shape, you've reconfigured it a little. And so the body's always upgrading and the brain's always upgrading. Our neuroplasticity, our ability for our brain to change and grow is just much more infinite than we appreciate. And so I don't think they quite go back. But what you do is then you start teaching them the exercises and ones that will work for them best, just so, etc., so that they can start to continually remind their body that this is true, and then deepen that so it gets more and more. But it's kind of like you can't, a lot of people will say things like, it's given me more gears on my bike. And they'll do things like, I don't immobilize now, I can watch myself going there, which usually you don't watch it, you just slide on in there and then you're stuck there for 3 or 4 days, or you hide in the broom closet or whatever it is you do. And they watch it, and then they can stay in their executive control, executive functioning enough to make some decisions, to take themselves away, to sit under a tree, to try my exercises.
Which is what we all
But
do, which is what we do, isn't it?
yeah, exactly. But they've got that faculty now, so they've got a break. You know, they can kind of make some choices in a way that was impossible before. So it's
also,
quite interesting.
We talk about this thing called muscle and sense memory, which we all have, which is how we operate unconsciously through the trials and tribulations. And we're noticing that when we work with the kids and we give them in, we haven't got the sophistication of knowing why we're doing it, because we do a lot of drama exercises, we do a lot of cross-body work, we do a lot of, you know, silly play in the body, and they remember that, you know. So we might do some breathing and they think it's just a fun game, but then they have the, I know what that felt like, and I can call on it when I need it. Sometimes I forget, but I notice that with maturity, they have that ability to call on it more. They can protect themselves from the onslaught, and they have a strategy, even though it doesn't always work, which is like us too, because we're not totally resilient. And I think that gives them such a sense of self and an empowerment tool that I think people who don't do that are waiting. They've either given up on the child thinking they'll never have that, or they're just waiting for it to arrive at some point. And I think we forget we have to guide, put stuff in place that you wouldn't normally for a neurotypical child, who will find that just through the way the body's made. And I think parents are scared though, because it feels like, well, how do I do that if I'm not a therapist? And I keep saying, yeah, therapy is really good, but if you can't afford it, there are simple things that you can just explore in your play with the child. And then they will tell you, because you'll see the evidence. Is that what you, I mean, it sounds like you're a bit like me. You do something, you go, oh, that's interesting. This looks like it's having an effect. Let's unpick it, or let's not even question it. Let's just keep doing it. It's not hurting anybody. You know, it's a plastic ball, and we'll just keep trying it. And then over years, you evolve this practice, and then you put it in a book, which is fantastic, because then people can fast track, which is brilliant. So I'm curious to know, as a parent, and I work with a lot of parents who are quite frightened of getting too dependent on therapy because of the costs. They just can't afford it, and also getting the child to the treatments every week. So at what point do people leave you and become self-sufficient? Is there a natural process, or it's different in every case?
It's different in every case. I like to enable people as fast as I can so that they can at least start doing things on their own at home. And it's not a regime. You know, you'll have some programs and you have to do 4 hours a day or half an hour a day at exact time, et cetera, et cetera. I don't think you can work like that with this kind of, you know, this nature of this work. So some people, like I'll literally, like I did last week, do intensives, and that's all they need. They've got it. They'll hold it. They'll go practice. We have a few follow-ups so they can make sure they know what they're doing, and then they're kind of good to go. And then others will need longer, and it really depends. I mean, we have a spectrum there. You know, your body can be very, very shut down. It can be quite out of your control, or you have to use so much willpower to get through your day. And for people like that, they might need more support, or people can have more emotional, social issues that they kind of want to stay around for as well and work through at the same time within this kind of framework. So all of the above, really. But I like to equip people.
You've also got the lived context, haven't you? Because obviously you've got the autism neurology, you've got the physiology that then kind of interplays with that. And then you've got someone's lived experience where there could have been so much trauma from not having people understand you, or the lived experience of just being in a situation that wasn't healthy for you. So again, you get back to their kind of safety place, and there might be other stuff to deal with, because they might start to realize some other level of trauma, which I think is scary. I've worked with a lot of kids, because we do a lot of work with breathing, very naively talk about breathing, because obviously that's a primary source of bringing your nervous system down. And I've worked in different guises. I don't work one-to-one at the moment because we're too busy, but for a long time I was doing one-to-one because I'm a trained counselor. And I remember with breathing, some kids just loved it, and it's like, oh, I feel it straight. Other kids were just terrified. They'd take the out breath, and then it would paralyze them, because, as you said, it's a brand new feeling that I'm used to. This horrible feeling, I don't like it, but I'm used to it. This new feeling is so scary. Letting go is so scary. And that was so distressing to see, because you're like, you can just get beyond. So obviously then what we do is you do breathing without calling it breathing, and then suddenly they're breathing. That really fascinates me, that it would instinctively give people the release that you presume that the breath work with anybody sort of does. And I imagine you found that too. There's a resistance because actually this feeling that I might not like is the only feeling I know. Start giving me another feeling and I don't know who I am.
I'm holding on for dear life, and it works well enough. And why would I let go? And I actually don't know what else is there, and you can't trust anything else. So it's a very, very vulnerable place. And then you're asking someone to be hugely vulnerable with you. So you need to make them safe all of the time, and that looks different for everyone.
Yeah, I was going to say, what are the conditions for success? I mean, are there some optimal conditions for success?
Yeah, I think one really big one is utter transparency. So you tell them what you're doing, and even if they're 5, you tell the mum what you're doing and they will listen, and you'll show them by getting the mum to do the exercise first, and so they can see, and you're always allowing them choice, and that's a huge part of it. I mean, people on the spectrum are so used to kind of coercive therapies on the whole anyway, but that aside, there's what we were talking about just a minute ago, that level of safety, that if you have choice, if you are allowed to appreciate what it is you're letting yourself in for, at a nervous system level, it will let you if you want to, and it's there, and you're not making these decisions purely cognitively. Your body is actually registering safety constantly, and it will allow you to progress or move, work with me if I get that right. And then I have to not have an outcome. So if I'm trying to get something achieved in a session, we might as well all go home.
Yeah.
And that again is very different, not from your work, but from a lot of stuff we've been doing historically with autism, where you have a checklist and you have to have gone through this program, in 10 weeks or in that session to prove to everyone you've done a good job. And for me, I think, well, who's at the center then? Because it's certainly not the client. Because if it's for the client, you don't know what it's going to look like on any day. You have no idea. And so I give permission for nothing to happen. And then we always get something done. And so it's that level of transparency where if you say that's true, you mean it, you come through with it. And so then you can guide, and then you can inquire, and then you can push a little when it's appropriate, but never with your own agenda, in a sense. You're always being very, very tuned in to the other person and what they need. So those conditions, I think, are vital, and a real appreciation of neurodiversity, which is appreciating the brilliance of the autistic mind, so that you're not coming in with an agenda of, I wish I could fix you, I wish I could cure you, I wish you were like me. Yeah. But actually going, I think you probably know a whole lot more than I'll ever know, and I'll never know what you know. So you have this environment of curiosity as opposed to a dominant ideology, a dominant kind of direction for the therapy.
I know.
And then people will go.
Yeah. I talk about daffodils and orchids, and I say that, anybody can be a daffodil, and that's great. And we need daffodils because they pop up and they look the same, and they're very hardy. And then what you have, I said, is an orchid, which is, it's going to look like a stick some days, and then other days it's going to go pop, pop, pop. And then you think, you've mastered orchids. So you get a whole load more, and then you think, oh, these ones aren't working so well. So you move them onto another shelf and you get frustrated. Then you're just about to throw it away and pop, pop, pop. And it's that sense of, it will tell you where's best in the house. It will tell you how it wants to look. And the joy when you get, your beautifully flourishing orchid, which you take all the credit for, of course, but actually it's doing its own thing in spite of you. And they quite like that. And I think it gives people a sense that this is a beautiful, as you say, a beautiful being, that the autism part of it, it's on its own journey, and it has a voice, or it has a expression, and we're just getting in the way. We have to give it the path. We have to give it the nurture, the path, the whatever, the gestation period, just to find its way. And it's frustrating because we live in a system that says, right, by 5 you should be doing this, and by 7, and parents are made to feel really bad if they haven't reached those milestones. And it's hard for parents, isn't it? And I talk a lot in our parent groups about, if you can step away from your expectations by not engaging in other people's, and I can only do that now because, like you, I've been working with kids for a long time, and I can see their journey. It's been chaotic, but they come through with something that was never expected, whether it be at 17, 28, 32. Just trust. but also these interventions can accelerate that and also give you a wonderful relationship as a parent. Because that's the other thing.
Yeah.
Parents often think that the treatment or whatever you've got is they're just empowered because they have to give their child over to somebody else and wait for the results,
Yes.
and then get very frustrated
Yeah.
when they don't get the results, because unless
Yes.
it's working like
Yes.
you work. And I'm saying you can do some really simple things. It's not to negate therapy. Therapy is fantastic, and OTs and what you're doing, but actually don't feel disempowered, because there are very simple, like the exercises you're talking about. We talk about breathing and counting and leaning into the child. We do a lot of work around Phoebe Caldwell intensive interaction, where you're just leaning into the child's rhythms, and if they're doing something, just do it with them, and do it with them lovingly and willingly, and then they'll get that sense of, oh, someone's connected with me. We talk a lot about that. So,
and someone trusts me just the way I am, and they believe in me, and that's huge. It can be hard to feel that when there's a lot of diagnosis going on and a lot of assessment, and you can really detract that for people. But if implicitly believe that your kid's fantastic, they can feel that with every fiber of their being. And
it's
people
really hard, isn't it, for a parent? Because a parent sitting in a doctor's waiting room and then appointments, and the parent is worried because the milestones aren't the same, and also there's a worry. If my child is like this now at 1, what's that trajectory? And they always think the trajectory is going to be more of this, and I'm going, no, it's not more of this. The child is passing through. You just have to give them the right environment. But the fear is, if they're doing this now, times that by 20 when they're 20, and this is unlivable with.
There's a lot of worry, there's a lot of anxiety, and there's a lot of sleeplessness, as I was saying, for the kids, but also for the parents. And if you're not sleeping well, and it's really hard. I think it can be quite a hard journey for parents in lots of ways.
Really hard. So what we try and do is, like I say, simplify stuff and say there are simple things you can do that might just be fun. They can do some of your exercise and go, this looks like fun. You think that's fine, and it might just be actually, we're now learning that if you work the body how it's meant to be worked, but you come from the outside in, because that's what you're doing. You're thinking, what's happening internally? How can I help that? We do. It's interesting because I've always done a little bit of yoga work with the kids, because we run a drama group, and I'm not a yoga teacher, but we do a lot of cross body work. And you suddenly realize that yoga isn't just good because it's yoga. I mean, because you're doing something that's mindful and slow. It's actually putting the body into positions that probably reflect what you're saying. Some of the cross body work, some of the pounding of the hand work. It's interesting, isn't it, how we haven't really associated it with being an internal support. It seems to be a mind support, but it's actually physiological. It's not strength. It's more than that. It's releasing stuff inside that child is in deficit.
And it's engendering a robustness internally that they just don't have otherwise. So they have to use their willpower just to get up in the morning and get their shoes and socks on and get to school. So when you get the internal system more robust, it can do those things more easily, and then still have room left over.
In my son, he's 21 now. He'll still have days where it just isn't working, whatever it is that needs to motivate him, activate him. And what's sad for him is he knows it now, so he's frustrated. Does that make sense? Whereas when he was younger, his whole world was this, and that was very despairing for him. And then he's had some fantastic productive periods in his life where he's just on all firing, he's the orchid. And then even now, because of this, he's had to come home from university, and he's just depleting because he doesn't have the internal motivation or the external motivation at the moment. And he knows he should. And I keep saying, you don't should anything at the moment. In fact, the joy of this COVID thing is you don't should anything. Nobody, I said, you've got the luxury of nobody's giving you any expectations, but it's hard, isn't it? Because that stop-start energy in autism, I don't think goes away. And I think that's frustrating. So the more you could be efficient, functioning, productive, expressive, it could be frustrating then when it leaves you on those days where you just wake up and he says his computer isn't working. I mean, you found that even however well you're doing, you can have these backward steps.
For example, we haven't said, but I'd consider myself on the spectrum. So for me, I've taken this week off because I did a week of intensives last week, and I'm exhausted. So I've learned now, and I can, because I've set my life up in a way that I can, where I have some rest afterwards and just recuperate. But it's still really annoying not to be able to just snap back up. But then what you try and remember is, the work I did was quite impressive. last week, and it was, you know, life-changing and lovely. So people, you know, like your orchid metaphor, which I really like, you do produce quite beautiful things, but it's a lilting kind of trajectory, and
Sometimes
it's
you're just
like
like a
being
stick.
a sea. Yeah, sometimes it's just like a stick, or you're in a rough sea and your ship is really being bandied around and you've lost a mast or two, and you just need to wait till you get some good wind again, or, you know, it's that sort of thing, and you have
You
to,
know
I
that.
guess,
So when
learn.
you're in your down week, whatever you want to call it, can you know it will come back, or do you feel a bit despairing that you don't know how you're going to get the energy for the next project, or do you trust now?
Oh, I mostly trust, but it kind of depends how exhausted I feel, really. And then I went today, oh, I could do my ball exercise. That's a good idea.
You've got
Which
to
I
talk to
forget
me as
as
well.
well.
You're talking to me, which is probably quite exhausting. Can you just tell me, and I won't keep you for much
No.
longer because this has been joyful, about your practice? So how does it work professionally? So do you see individuals? Do you see groups? Are you on your own? Is Western Australia embracing this kind of work?
Uh, in 2018, I won a National Disability Awards in WA for my work for excellence in innovation. And I've been nominated this year for excellence in innovation and excellence in leadership. So that's really fun for me. So at that kind of level, our government system's really cool, and there's some really fabulous people in the disability sector really trying to drive a high level of autonomy and empowerment that isn't paying lip service to these things. So they're beautiful. I'm gaining more momentum, and it's taken a really long time for people to embrace it, because it's flips. You know, we're talking about the body and how it influences the mind instead of the other way around, and it's not language we're accustomed to. It's not what you've learned at uni, you know, it's starting to now. So I'm garnering support, and then I've got some really great people internationally, and I travel internationally quite a lot now, who are very supportive, but they very much understand what I'm doing. So it's always, you know, and it's lovely talking to you because you embrace it and you get really excited about it because it clicks with what you're doing. With my practice, I have a very long waiting list now. So I see people one-on-one, but I don't really have any space now for that. So I'm doing these intensives so I can just, you know, get a chunk of time and, you know, do that properly and then get back to my regular clients. I do a lot of workshops and I'm starting to train people. So I have quite a long list of people wanting to learn it. So we're just in the midst of trying to get a framework for that so I do it well, and then people can start using it. So people start using the work at lots of different levels. Like they will just watch the DVD and then go away and practice it and play around with it. And then, you know, if they do a workshop with me, they get a little bit more nuance. One of the families from last week have done the videos, but the work with me was much more, you know, the nuance and the attention and it's almost, one lady said it's almost like midwifery. Yeah, the way that I work, which I thought was quite interesting. You're witnessing this incredible process with people, but you're not in charge of it. And then you have to do all of the things that a midwife does, which I think I must just do naturally, or at least they make sense with everything, is that you don't make direct eye contact. You let, you know, you're party to it and you'll do your part, but it's beyond you.
Yeah.
So yeah, can't remember what the question was
No,
completely
I was
now,
really
but
curious to know how your practice actually, you know, exists and how you function. So there'll be a whole school, I hope, of Holly
yes,
Bridges. That's the Holly Bridges School,
yes,
because it just
yes.
makes so much sense. I know OTs obviously recognize this, but they don't. It's not top of their priority, is it? It's kind of something they offer, and I wish that there was a whole school of thought. I can't understand why there are certain practices, and I'm not going to say the name, that have so much traction, funded, and get some results, but don't now have the long-term results. And what you're doing, and I know other people who are doing it, which is brilliant as a practice, it just seems like an underground alternative therapy thing that's kind of nice over there that, you know, the middle class mummies can do if they can afford it. That's what it seems like.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
just don't know. I
yeah.
mean, I'd love to know how, because I'm quite a pioneer activist, how we could get it more up front, because it's the same here. There's one or two people who are pioneering it, but they haven't got time to pioneer because they've got their practice. They think, well, in my practice, it's full, but you're talking about, you know, 50 to 100 people. rather than it
Yes.
being a national understanding.
Yes.
I don't know how we
It's
do
it
that.
it slowly but surely, there's people linking up all over the world, and it's very hard for OTs. So, I know people and they would like to embrace this more because but there's a lot of confinement in the industry about what's appropriate, because there always is in an industry, and it's driven by all sorts of constraints to keep people safe, to the et cetera, et cetera. It's all quite reasonable, but it means that you can't really get anything new in there. And a lot of people think they know everything there is to know about autism. I just don't agree. I think there's so much more we can start playing with, and I see it all of the time now. So I think for me, my role feels like I just get to show people what's possible, and then it filters out where it will, and then there's you, and then there's all the other people around the world kind of tickling around with this, and at some point it becomes what's that word when that term it gets enough mass, it gets enough credible mass, and then it starts shifting, and then people feel safe adopting it. Whereas at the moment it's a bit wacky, and it's seen to be a bit wacky because we don't know the language of the mind body in that way. And what I do really well, I guess, is I break it all down. So in my workshops I go through it much more than in the book, with looking at the cranial nerves, and the vagus nerve is one of them. And when you start looking at them and how they operate depending on the state of the body, it starts to be easy for people, and so you break down all the barriers that way. But then I'll run advanced workshops, and I'll have beautiful people in there, but they still come in from an avenue of wanting a cure or wishing it wasn't there. And so breaking that up after well over 100 years of a certain mindset is quite hard to crack. So I think that's too.
There must be lots of research papers into it, or not really? Who's done big research into it?
I try really hard to get people to take my work seriously research-wise, and I'm sent something off again this morning, so I'll hope it'll get somewhere. But no, it's really interesting. It's very hard to do something new. And then it's also, interestingly, with the autism community, because for new parents, they wouldn't know this, it's quite lovely to tap into it, but there's a huge network of people on the spectrum talking about being on the spectrum, talking about therapies they approve of, etc., and allowing a different space. My work doesn't kind of fit in there either, because often it's seen as that you're saying people aren't enough just as they are. And so it's really hard to hit that mid-ground where you're going, yes, you are, but wouldn't it be nice if you felt better? Wouldn't it be nice if you could operate a whole lot more successfully, more often, and regulate, and all of that sort of thing? And it's not detracting from the brilliance of autism. So I'm always trying to crack through quite a few different doors.
Maybe, you know what, I'm going to get on my client list and just get on with the work I'm doing. Yeah.
Well, I don't. I travel a lot. I run workshops a lot. I'll put myself in the firing line enough. But hopefully at some point, I don't know. I always knew it would be grassroots that this started working, because parents know what they're looking at. And if you've been in the scene for 5-10 years, you know what therapies work, you know whether they're going to work or not. And so they implicitly will look at me and go, yep, that makes perfect sense, and be very inclined to the work. So that's actually where we get the change, and I think that's fundamentally being redirected with the autism community as well, is there's a whole lot of client-based knowledge now. So it's coming along. I think it's coming along nicely. Really.
Brilliant. I'm conscious of time, and I don't want to take up too much of your time or energy. So it's been so fantastic talking to you, like a kindred spirit and an inspiration. Do you want to just tell us the name of the book so people can be directed to that? And then you would suggest a link. Obviously, we can talk after this and you can give me the link. So when I finish pressing the button here, the recording button, let's stay on and just catch up. But what's the name of your book, Holly?
So my book is called Reframe Your Thinking Around Autism by Holly Bridges. My website is www.zebr.co, like zebra without the a.co. And if you go to my website and click on buy the video and type in Smile 2020, you can download it for free. So
that is brilliant.
We just did that. We did that with the whole COVID thing, just to, there are a whole lot of people.
Because again, your world must have changed a
you know.
bit. You won't be flying over here anytime soon, will you?
I tell you what, it's been nice. I really want to come over, but I traveled the last 3 years. I've done a lot of travel, so it's actually bliss. I've got 6 puppies and I'm pottering around in my little house and still working quite a lot because I work online and it works really, really well, amazingly well.
Brilliant.
So I'm still quite busy, but no, it's been quite beautiful. But next time I come over, I will definitely come and find you.
Well, we'll try and arrange some kind of event, but it might be, as I said, actually, I'm going to finish off now and we'll have a little chat after this. Not that I don't want anybody on our YouTube channel to listen to this, but it's just going to be, boring chat. But listen, you've been amazing. Thank you so much. Go back and cuddle those puppies. And it really, anybody listening to this, it's amazing what Holly's talking about. And actually, not to patronize it, but it's really simple. And it just read the book and see what you think. But thank you so much, Holly. It's been amazing.
Utter pleasure. Thank you.